land of the blue sky, Mongolia is an immense territory of plains and mountains. Although a third of its population is nomadic, the country is undergoing change. Today's yurts are equipped with solar panels. In the heart of the country, in the middle of the steppe, lies a sacred site that transcends time. Erdene Zuu Monastery is without a doubt Mongolia's most ancient Buddhist sanctuary. It has housed over 60 temples, but most were razed by the communist authorities at the beginning of the 20th century. Re-established in the 1990s, today it harbors a school where young students come to quench their thirst for knowledge.
My name is Jovdu Sanji. I began studying Buddhism here in Erdene Zuu at the age of 14. Before coming to Erdene Zuu, I lived in the village of Zunbayan. I went to school there. Once I finished the last class of middle school, I obtained the Certificate of General Education. A monk came from Erdene Zuu Monastery to see us and asked if we were interested in joining the monastery and settling there. I said I was interested.
After having rung the morning prayer, Jovdu Sanji joins the other monks for the first lessons of the day. "60 monks live here year-round. The youngest follow a regular school program along with their religious training. Many of the students who arrived the same year as Jovdu Sanji renounce this studious and demanding religious life.
When we arrived here, the first few months we were dressed in our civilian clothes. 2 months later, we received blessings from our High Lama. From that time on, we were allowed to wear monk robes. I decided to become a monk on my own. It was not my family's choice. I want to go all the way in this vocation. It has now been 4 years since I arrived at the Erdene Zuu Monastery.
Today, a beautiful and peaceful spot, Erdene Zuu Monastery was once the starting point of one of the biggest conquest wars in history. In the 13th century, it is from here that the great Genghis Khan departs to build his empire. Crossing the vast plains of Mongolia, China, and Russia, his army set up yurts as they moved forward. Orna Aurenchimeg Sultem, professor of Buddhist art at the University of Berkeley in the United States, never tires of studying Erdene Zuu, the site that bears the history of the Mongol Empire.
Gyr is a nomadic architecture. It was built by nomads and from ancient times, because people move with this. It can be dismounted very short in an hour. And when Buddhism came to Mongolia, it also started to be used for temples. The site where Erdene Zuu is, big, huge gyr was built for the founder, Abatai Khan, who is the descendant of Genghis Khan. And it was so huge that a regular gyr of nomadic people looked like a toy next to it, because it was such a huge ceremonial gyr. Today, unfortunately, the gyr does not exist, but we see the pillar bases in there, and we can see the measurement of it, dimensions of it, and imagine how huge it was.
This giant yurt became a monastery that traveled across the country to spread Buddhism. Abatai Khan also ordered the construction of the 3 Zuu, Chinese-style temples aligned, facing east in a small area, bearing the influences of neighboring countries. Here, Chinese architecture meets Tibetan Buddhism.
Abatai Khan received images and received relics of Buddha Shakyamuni from the Dalai Lama. And according to Buddhist ritual, you have to build a structure to house the relic. So the central temple was built by Abatai Khan and enshrines that important relic and also has the image of Buddha Shakyamuni. He used the Chinese craftsmen and brought this Chinese craftsmen to Mongolia to build a Chinese-style temple. The temple is a 2-story temple. And in the tradition of Chinese architecture with a double roof structure, and it has an important symbol of double vajra on top of the roof, symbolizing the firmness of Buddhism to prosper here in Mongolia.
Afterwards, Abatai Khan's descendants had the Didan Lavran Temple built in honor of the Dalai Lama, the great spiritual leader of Tibetans. Inspired by the architecture of the Himalayan mountain temples, it reveals the spiritual and political influence of Tibet on the Buddhist state that Mongolia became. The Didan Lavran Temple was built not in stone like in Tibet, but in baked bricks and wood. Over centuries, Erdene Zuu became the most important religious center in Mongolia, with 62 temples and a community of over 1,000 lamas. Followers gather in numbers to commemorate the anniversary of the enlightenment of Buddha, the moment of attained enlightenment when he broke away from his own desires. Along with this visit of Erdene Zuu, the followers begin a voyage of initiation and a spiritual journey, a day to purify themselves and pray alongside monks of the monastery. Amongst the most sacred of objects are unbound books protected by bright-colored fabric. They contain the sutras, religious texts which carry the word of Buddha. Monks are the only ones authorized to read them.
To be a monk, one must be charitable. Today we pray for others. We read the sacred books, not for us, but for the good of others. We cannot pray only for our relatives. After the prayer, we must learn the ritual offerings. For us, it is a very important ritual. For when we visit people's homes, we must do 2 things: the ritual offerings and the reading of sacred texts. This is a cake I am preparing to appease and cheer the spirit of the earth. When we have no rain, I do a ritual offering for the sky to give us rain. This cake is made with tea flour and butter. The 8 leaves are the symbol of the spirit of the earth. Different types of cakes have different functions.
Erdene Zuu is a site in perpetual evolution, that has been modified over a period surpassing 300 years by Abatai Khan and his descendants. The vast enclosure surrounding the site is topped with 108 white sculptures containing relics. They are stupas. They make the site visible from long distances all around. In the center, funerary stupas shelter the remains of Abatai Khan, founder of the monastery, and his family.
Stupa, of course, is one of the earliest structures of Buddhism, and it began in India to enshrine the relics of Buddha Shakyamuni. So according to our belief, Buddha Shakyamuni, when he passed to Nirvana, his body was cremated and divided into his different areas for his disciples. And those relics were enshrined in stupa. So when stupa arrived to Mongolia from Himalayas, it took the shape, still bulbous, but it also included images and sculptures inside, as well as enshrined relics of important teachers and relics of Buddha Shakyamuni. The meaning of stupas in Mongolia also includes celebration of important events. For instance, this stupa behind me is called Golden Stupa, and it's commemorative, important ruler of Mongolia. Nowhere else but Mongolia we see stupas that enshrine not teachers but secular rulers, such as the founder of this monastery, Abatai Khan, and his wife, Handjamts. So men and women, secular people, important rulers of Mongolia, were also enshrined in stupas in this particular site.
By becoming a mausoleum for man and for Buddha, the stupa abolishes the border between the profane and the sacred. Erdene Zuu is a political and religious symbol. In 1939, it was the first victim of an unprecedented purge led by the Mongol communist power to eradicate Buddhism. Most of the monastery's temples were destroyed and the monks executed. In all of Mongolia, the purges would cause the death of over 17,000 monks. The commemorations continue outside. The monks, at the head of a large procession, leave the monastery. They begin a procession along the walls of the site. They turn in a movement that will bring them back to their starting point, simulating the rotation of the Earth around the Sun. For the Grand Lama, this procession outside of the monastery demonstrates freedom restored since the fall of the communist regime.
We, the younger generation, have taken over to further the activities. For 70 years, every day, the old monks officiated, read the sacred texts, prayed, and accomplished their rituals in hiding. But now we no longer need to hide, and we can pray in the open every day, especially on days of religious celebrations.
Local people were hiding things as much as they could. For instance, in Erdene Zuu, they hid away various images. They hid away the main worship, the deity, the Mahakala deity, which used to be and still is the main worship. They hid away the texts in caves, sometimes risking their lives at home. Even though the architecture was destroyed, the tradition somehow was preserved. In 1990, when the taboo was lifted on Buddhism, the caves opened and people were coming out with a hidden culture which they preserved in their homes or in caves. And it's very impressive how out of nothing, even though the architecture was completely destroyed, people carried with them their heritage. And this heritage helped them to reconstruct and build the temples anew.
It's a story of a renaissance, that of Erdene Zuu, the most ancient sanctuary of the country. Walking in the footsteps of the generations of monks preceding him, Jovdu Zanjid represents the future of the monastery.
The monks of Erdene Zuu are respected throughout the country. The monastery is well known. We are respected everywhere we go. The other grand monastery is in Ulan Bator. It is the Gandan Monastery. When I finish my studies in Ulan Bator, I will come back to work as a monk at the Erdene Zuu Monastery. My two professors show great faith in me, and I do not want to betray their trust. This is why I would like to come back to Erdene Zuu to become a Grand Lama astronomer.
At 360 kilometers east of Erdene Zuu, the capital of Mongolia, Ulan Bator. The Gandan Monastery houses the biggest religious school of the country. 7 temples are devoted to its teachings and its disciples. The monks there study religion while following a university curriculum. Betzengel Azrald is one of their professors.
Buddhist religion is particularly centered on teaching and research. In the teachings of Buddha, we have 3 parts: religion, philosophy, and science. And for us, the most important is philosophy and science. It's why we provide great attention to these subjects. Today, religion is closely linked to science. This association is very beneficial to both. Consequently, in Mongolia, we're careful about a religious training that goes hand in hand with modern knowledge.
During the 20 years of study spent immersed in the sacred texts and philosophy, monks do not live reclusive lives. They observe the world around them to better meet its needs.
Our long-term objective is to understand the soul of modern people. Especially these days, our society is undergoing a lot of change. People's mentalities are evolving. And in the middle of all this, how is it possible to preserve our culture, our traditions? We need to discern what is valuable to keep and develop, the good traditions.
Монголд бол одоо манай Монголын өвөрмөц одоо онцлогтой бурхны шишин бол бидэрт байгаа.
In the late afternoon, many followers come to gather after their day's work. The central temple houses a monumental statue of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. Measuring 26 meters, it is the tallest indoor statue in the world. It is said that the original, which was requisitioned by the Soviets during World War II, was melted to make bullets for the guns of the Battle of Stalingrad. This certified copy was installed in the temple in the 1990s. Covered in gold and close to 2,000 gemstones, it weighs over 20 tons. It is a symbol of the renewal of Buddhism in Mongolia. On the walls, shelves are filled with thousands of statuettes of Amitabha, the Buddha of longevity. After a ban of many years, Buddhist monks resumed the dancing of TSAM, a traditional dance, a ritual which only initiated lamas can perform. In a combination of theater and dance, they highlight the most secret esoteric teachings of Buddhism. Following the rhythms of the musical instruments, they chase away bad spirits and seek to attract good ones.
The TSAM mask dance has been well known for a long time now. It was a very important religious celebration. It was banned during the communist regime. When looking at this dance, one can think that it's just a dance, but in reality it has religious significance and shows how to get rid of the evil. These movements have profound significance, which are linked to a form of secret prayer. Highly trained monks are initiated to this form of secret prayer. Even the Buddha secretly initiated chosen disciples to perform this prayer.
Once a year, lamas from across the country gather for the festival of TSAM. They carry heavy masks, which are disproportionate and bright-colored, to chase away the spirits of the underworld, lost souls which cannot reincarnate. Meanwhile, the good spirits are invoked to purify the world of the living. The communist regime tried to erase all forms of religious practice. Today, this festival is a symbol of the renewal of belief, mixing Buddhism and ancestral customs. This flamboyant festival brings together all communities of modern Mongolia: believers, seculars, nomads, and those of sedentary lifestyles.